a curtain fell, and a life was lost. Welcome to Faded Echoes. I am your host, Ombra. Drop a comment and let me know where you're tuning in from. I love reading your replies. Your voices make every mystery feel alive. Let's uncover the truth. If you know Nero Wolfe, even by rumor, you know there are 3 things a sane person does not disturb: his orchids, his chair, and his dinner. The 4th is his schedule, which is the wrapping paper around the other 3. It was 10 minutes past 7 on a Tuesday in October, and Fritz Brenner was about to serve the corn soup. I know that because I was sitting in my rightful place at the table, watching Fritz fuss over the tureen like it was a christening, and Wolfe's lips were moving, not talking, mind you, just rehearsing what he was about to do to the soup. The bell rang. It rang once, decisively, with a tone that said the finger on the button had not read the house rules posted in my skull. No interruptions between 7 and 9. Wolfe closed his eyes. That was as far as he goes toward profanity at the dinner table. Fritz froze like he was about to be raided. I said, "If that's a package, I'll kill the delivery man, bury him, and we'll blame the smell on the neighbors." Wolfe opened his eyes. "Confine yourself to your talents, Archie. Answer it." I sighed the sigh of a man who has seen too much and not enough, shoved my chair back and headed out. On the way through the hall, I detoured just enough to glance at the clock in the front room. 7:12. Any visitor at that hour had a talent for timing or trouble. I opened the door. She was trouble. About 30, give or take a year of good lighting, in a dark green suit that had cost more than my entire wardrobe, but had the good manners not to shout about it. She had hair the color of maple syrup and eyes that were having an argument between fear and pride. And so far, fear was winning. In her left hand, she clutched a leather handbag like it was a life preserver. "Good evening," she said. Her voice had some gravel in it, the kind you get from speaking into microphones in smoky rooms or yelling over applause. "Is this the Nero Wolfe residence?" I took a second to decide whether to lie and save my life, then remembered Wolfe's eyes back in the dining room. He hates lies directed at him even more than interruptions directed at his soup. "You have the address," I told her. "You also have unfortunate timing. Mr. Wolfe is at dinner." "I know," she said. The fear won another inch. "I called earlier. Your man, someone, told me to come at 7:30. There's been a change. May I come in?" She didn't have the look of someone who collects monthly for the gas company or wants me to sign a petition to save the pigeons. Also, you learn to spot the kind of person who has been holding herself together with spit and stubbornness and is about 3 minutes from coming apart on your doorstep. "Who told you?" 7:30, I asked. Whoever answered the phone, he had a... She gestured vaguely. A voice like a lion that had retired in disgust. That was Wolfe, all right. So he'd invited her. That was interesting. Wolfe does not invite. People ask, beg, plead, and occasionally threaten, but he doesn't invite. "Come in," I said, stepping back. "You're either expected, or you've just made the most dangerous mistake of your life." She moved past me, bringing a faint scent of something expensive and faintly floral that didn't try to throttle you. We went down the hall. I opened the dining room door and announced, "Client." Wolfe growled. He doesn't do it out loud. It's all in the eyes and the nostrils. His napkin was across his knees. His big bulk settled into the special chair that had given up hope years ago. He gave our visitor one slow, comprehensive look that took in her clothes, her shoes, the way she held her mouth, and probably what she'd had for lunch. "Confound it," he said. "I told you 7:30. She flushed. "I know. I'm sorry. Something happened. It couldn't wait." "So it appears." He flicked his gaze at me. "Archie." Her name. I looked at her. She swallowed. "My name is Lydia Voss. If you follow the theater pages in the Times, that might mean something to you. I don't, as a rule, unless someone gets shot in the balcony. But even I had heard of Lydia Voss. Not because I haunt Broadway, but because I've occasionally taken women there who do, and you pick up a name or two while enduring modern tragedies about people who don't know how to talk to each other. Lydia Voss was supposed to be one of the rising ones. Smart, demanding, never late for curtain, and able to make a ticket price look like a bargain. Wolfe's eyebrows twitched a millimeter. That's about as demonstrative as a 4th of July parade for him. So he'd heard of her, too. "Sit down, Miss Voss," he said. "You have preempted my soup. That is a serious matter. You had better justify it." There are people who crumble when Wolfe fixes those eyes on them. She didn't. Her fingers tightened on the handbag, but she walked to one of the chairs and sat. Spine straight. Smart. If you slouch in front of Wolfe, he'll write you off as a jellyfish and you may as well go home. "I wouldn't have come," she said, "if it wasn't urgent. But there's a man who's going to be killed, and I think it's going to happen in my theater, and I believe someone has already started rehearsing for it." Well, that was one way to liven up corn soup. "Pfui," Wolfe said. "Revision. You do not believe. You fear. Belief requires some foundation." She gave him the kind of look I've seen directors give actors who try to improvise Shakespeare. "I know what I saw. I said, if you two don't mind, I'd like this on the record before the soup congeals past saving. Miss Voss, who's rehearsing? Murder. And what's the role?" She glanced at me, then back at Wolfe. He was watching her like she was a new species of orchid that had turned up unexpectedly, already potted. "We opened previews last week," she said. "My new play, Curtain Call. I wrote it, I'm producing it, and I'm in it. It's a big step for me." "So, I gather," Wolfe murmured. She took a breath. "Tonight, during the second act, the main curtain dropped early. Completely. Without a cue." I said, "How early? A second? A minute, or halfway through your big speech about the futility of modern love?" 13 seconds. Her mouth flattened. "I timed it from the booth playback. We checked the board, the lines, the sandbags, everything. There was no reason it should have fallen, except there was one." Wolfe made a small motion with one finger. "State it." "There was a man standing in the wings," she said, and now the fear in her voice was walking point. Exactly where the counterweight would have swung if the curtain had dropped at full speed. He would have been crushed, skull, neck. It would have killed him. "Would have?" I asked. "The safety caught," she replied. Someone had half engaged it. So the curtain dropped fast, then jerked, then eased down. It still nearly knocked him off his feet, but if that safety hadn't been partially engaged, and if he'd been a foot forward, it would have snapped his neck like... She stopped, like in an old news headline. "Who is this man?" Wolfe asked. "Victor Harrow." She said it like the name tasted bad. "Our lead producer, and more than that, at least to the rest of them." "Not to you?" "No." She licked her lips. The green suit shifted as she straightened. "Look, accidents happen in theaters all the time. Cables fray, props fall, actors miss their light and stand in a blackout like idiots. But this wasn't that." "How do you know?" I asked. Her eyes snapped to mine. "Because someone had to climb to the grid and half-release that safety. Someone had to calculate the weight and slack so that the curtain would drop hard enough to be dangerous, but not so hard that it looked deliberate. Somebody wanted to see what would happen if the curtain came down 13 seconds early, with Victor standing where he always stands to watch the bridge scene." "That's detailed," I said. "It's a theater," she shot back. "We live on details. Cues, marks, timing. Also, the rope was new. We replaced it 3 months ago for insurance. Nobody just forgets to latch a safety on a brand new line." Wolfe's eyes were half closed now. That's when he's listening hardest. "Miss Voss," he said, "you speak as if the sabotage is established. Is it?" "Yes." The word came out fast. "Our stage manager, Leo Chalmers, found a cut in the retaining rope where someone had started to saw at the fibers, then stopped. The fibers were frayed in one section only. Someone had begun and then changed their mind, or decided they only needed to weaken it. I made a note to myself. Leo Chalmers, stage manager, likes rope. I didn't write it down. Contrary to what you might think, I don't take notes at dinner unless it's the wine list. I keep them where they belong, between my ears. So, I summed up, tonight the curtain drops early and almost turns Victor Harrow into an ex-producer, but doesn't. You find a rope with a haircut. You decide someone's rehearsing homicide. That sends you to call Nero Wolfe and ask for an appointment. He says come at 7:30, you show up early and interrupt his soup. I'm caught up. Her hands tightened again. There's more. The curtain didn't just fall early. It fell at the precise moment Victor stepped into place. He always watches that scene from stage left. Always. That's his habit. He refuses to sit in the house during previews because he doesn't want to hear the audience whisper. Tonight he was on the line. He stepped forward and the curtain came down. Coincidence, Wolfe said. She shook her head. We replayed the booth recording. The sound op mutters, "What the—" When the curtain starts to go, the fly man panics and hits the emergency. There is no cue. Somebody else tripped that line. The only way is from up on the grid. Wolfe regarded her. His fingers, resting on the table, were motionless. His soup, neglected, sent up a faint steam that Fritz was probably monitoring like a surgeon outside the door. You have told Mr. Harrow your conclusions? He asked. Yes. He laughed. Her lips twisted. He said if someone wanted him dead, they'd pick a less theatrical way to do it. Then he said if I wanted to build buzz for the show, a near-death experience was tasteless, but creative. And then? I told him I was calling the police. Did you? No. Her voice was suddenly flat. Because he told me that if I did, he would pull his money, close the show, and make sure I never worked again in any theater that didn't have folding chairs. That's colorful, I said. It's Victor, she answered. He owns 51% of the production, and he thinks that makes him God with better suits. If the show closes, I'm finished. Not just as a playwright or actress. My company goes under. The investors he brought in will walk, and they'll tell everyone I'm unstable. I've mortgaged everything to get this play mounted. Wolfe made a sound deep in his throat. If you've never heard a disgusted alligator, that'll do. So you require me, he said, to prevent a possible murder in a theater without the assistance of the police, in such a fashion that your career, your company, and your production emerge unscathed. I require you to find out who's doing this and stop them, she said. If Victor wants to pretend it's nothing, fine. Let him. But if someone is planning to kill him and they rehearse again, they may not miss. And why, Wolfe asked lazily, should that concern you? If you despise him. She stared at him. Because I don't want anyone killed in my theater, she said finally. Not even Victor, and because if he dies in there, under my curtain, my play will be a ghost forever. No one will ever speak a line from it again without thinking of his body on the stage. That's not the kind of immortality I'm after. Wolfe's lips moved. If you squinted, it could have been approval. Archie, he said. What does Mr. Harrow's death, hypothetical, implicate for us? I shrugged. Another dead man in New York isn't good for the general ambience, but it's hard to see how it affects our immediate income. Unless Miss Voss here wishes to buy some of your time. Her chin lifted. I can pay you, she said quickly. Not what you're worth, maybe, but more than your average box of tickets. I have a production budget. I can— You will not. Wolfe cut her off. Dismantle your production to pay my fee. That would be counter to your stated objective. What is your liquid resource? She blinked. There's a reserve account for emergencies. This seems emergency-ish, I put in. She shot me a look that would have worked on actors. On me, it just registered and went into the file under spirited. 20,000, she said. I could free 10 without delaying payroll. Wolfe closed his eyes again. That's when the mental adding machine goes to work. $10,000 for a curtain and a maybe murder. Not bad as disruptions go. Archie, he said, opening them, inform Mr. Kramer that if a body should be found in a theater called the... What is it, Miss Voss? The Lyric Paramount, she said. Pooh, aye. The more grandiose the name, the shabbier the carpets, he muttered. If a body should be found there, tell him that I was importuned beforehand and declined to intervene. That will irritate him. I will not be implicated in his fulminations. I raised my brows. In other words, you're saying no. I'm stating a condition, Wolfe replied. He shifted his bulk. Slightly, but on him that's like a minor tectonic event. Miss Voss, I will consider acting on your behalf if, and only if, certain premises are met. For that, I require information, not hysteria. How many people knew that Mr. Harrow habitually stands at that point in the wings? At least 10, she frowned. The cast, crew, stage management. Anyone who's been through a rehearsal knows Victor's habits. He tells everyone where he'll be in case he wants to give notes the moment a scene ends. Names, Wolfe said. She hesitated, then gave them. Victor, of course. Leo Chalmers, the stage manager. Nina Darcy, my co-star. Owen Fleet, the director. Mason Kell, the fly captain. He runs the rigging. 2 apprentice riggers. Our understudy, Alan Price, the house electrician, Marcus Long, and my assistant, Caro Lind. As she spoke, I filed them away. A neat little cast. Some of those would be hearing from me in the near future, whether they wanted to or not. Wolfe looked at me. There. A circle, he said. It begins. Begins what? She demanded. He ignored her. And you are certain, Miss Voss, that no one outside this circle knew of Mr. Harrow's preferred vantage? No, she said honestly. I can't be sure. But those are the people who are there, night after night. If someone tampered with the line, it was one of them. No one else has access to the grid during a performance. Not entirely true, I said. I've been backstage plenty, and I've seen more civilians wandering around than you'd like to admit. Critics, donors, friends. Not on my show, she said sharply. House rule. No one past the green room without a crew escort, and only rigging crew goes up. Very well, Wolfe said. You maintain a controlled environment. I'm partial to those. You propose that someone in this controlled environment wishes Mr. Harrow dead. You cannot summon the police without risking your livelihood. You ask me to expose the culprit, deter the act, and preserve your show for a fee of $10,000. Yes. He looked at his soup as if remembering its existence with regret. I accept. Fritz, who had evidently been listening on the other side of the door with his ear pressed firmly to the wood, chose that moment to enter, bearing the tureen. His expression said that whatever had just interrupted the service would be judged later and possibly condemned. Archie, Wolfe went on, you will go to this benighted theatre tomorrow. You will observe the physical arrangement. You will speak to the persons Miss Voss has named, in an order of your choosing. You will attend a performance if possible, and watch this curtain that falls before its cue. That can be arranged, Lydia said quickly. I'll leave a pass at the box office. Dress circle, stage left. I prefer the orchestra, I told her. My eyesight's fine, but my legs have standards. Front row, aisle, she agreed. You can lean. Excellent, Wolfe said dryly. Perhaps you will catch the curtain in your arms. Miss Voss, you will provide Archie with any further details he requests. You will not disarrange your routines or alert your colleagues to his purpose beyond what is necessary. I prefer that the potential murderer not be given time to rewrite his script. Yes, of course, she murmured. Some of the tightness had gone out of her shoulders. With Wolfe, once he says, I accept, you might as well relax. The wheel has started turning and you're along for the ride, invited or not. One more thing, Wolfe added. You said someone has already begun to rehearse. If that is true, they will not abandon the design easily. Interference may provoke invention. You must be prepared for improvisations. Her hands trembled once, then steadied. I live with improvisations, she said, but I'd prefer they stay on the stage. Wolfe snorted. On the stage is where people most often lie, he said. It is real-life idiots are unprepared for. He tilted his head. You may eat. She blinked. I beg your pardon? You have upset my dinner, he told her. The least you can do is assist in restoring its equilibrium. Fritz has more than enough. Archie, see that Miss Voss is fed. Then get what information you require from her and see her to a taxi. We resume in the morning. He picked up his spoon. That, in Wolfe's world, is the equivalent of closing an office door in your face. Lydia Voss stared at him for a second, then looked at me. Is he always like this? This, I said. You're getting him on a polite night. Come along, Miss Voss. Fritz's corn soup is one of the things in this cold world that make life worth risking your neck in the theater. She rose, clutching her bag less tightly now, and followed me out. Behind us, Wolfe attended to his soup, already working. In that brain of his, on a curtain that had dropped before its cue and before the murder it had promised. Fritz, being the diplomat of the household, managed not to glare at our guest as I guided her to the kitchen table. He set a bowl in front of her with a dignity usually reserved for royalty or a particularly deserving soufflé. She thanked him, sincerely, which earned her a fractional softening of Fritz's eyebrows. That's practically a love sonnet from him. I sat opposite her, giving her room to eat without feeling like she was being interrogated again. She took a spoonful, closed her eyes briefly. Fritz's cooking can do that to people. And then let out a breath that had been waiting all evening for permission. Do you always live like this? She asked. In a house where everything is calm and orderly and logical. Oh, sure, I said. Perfect serenity. Except when someone is threatening murder in a Broadway house, or Wolfe is being blackmailed, or there's a bomb in the front hall, or a client decides to die on the office rug. But aside from that, utterly peaceful. She cracked a smile at that, and it was a decent one. Nothing put on, just an honest flicker of relief. People in trouble often forget they're allowed to have a sense of humor until you give it back to them. After a few minutes of letting her get reacquainted with being a human who has eaten recently, I leaned back and said, All right, Miss Voss. Let me get the basic shape of this thing before I jump into it tomorrow. You said Victor Harrow has enemies. That's the same as saying water is wet. But in this case, I'll need names. She set her spoon down and wiped her mouth, posture tightening again as she shifted, from guest to witness. Victor collects enemies, she said. He thinks it's proof that he's important. Owen, our director, can barely stand him. Nina hates him because he gives notes during her scenes. Leo puts up with him for the paycheck. Mason? Well, Mason would rather strangle him with a lighting cable than talk to him, but he hides it well enough to keep his job. And your assistant? Caro? I asked. Caro is loyal to me. She tolerates Victor the way a saint tolerates mosquitoes. Which saint is that? I asked. Whichever one didn't swat out a principal. I grinned. Fair enough. And what about you? How long have you known Victor? 2 years, she said. He backed one of my earlier productions. Small scale, but successful enough that he wanted in on the next one. I thought that meant he respected my work. What it really meant was that I hadn't met his conditions yet. And those are obedience, gratitude, public praise, and not too much success, unless he can claim credit. Sounds charming. He's a necessary evil, she said softly. At least he was. I gave her a moment, then asked, You said the rope was cut. Any idea who would even have access to the equipment outside of performance hours? Mason, she said immediately. The fly captain. He's the one who signs for the keys to the grid. His 2 apprentices, Geordie and Beth, are usually with him, but they don't go up unsupervised. Nobody else has business up there unless something's malfunctioning, and yesterday, everything was fine. Who discovered the cut? Leo. He checks the lines personally when something goes wrong, even if it's not his department. It's part responsibility, part obsession. He showed it to me and said it wasn't wear. It was deliberate. She wasn't embellishing. Her tone was too tight, too steady. Theatre people are natural dramatists, but when someone's scared, you hear the difference. All right, I said. Tomorrow I'll talk to them one by one. See who squirms, who lies, and who pretends not to care. I stood. You finish that soup and I'll grab your coat. She didn't protest. When Fritz cooks, people obey the food hierarchy. I helped her into her jacket, and we stepped out into the night. The air had the kind of crispness that makes you think about fireplaces and reasons to avoid walking too fast. She wasn't in any hurry either. She paused at the bottom of the steps, looking up at the brownstone. He's different, she said quietly. I didn't expect him to agree. You and me both, I admitted. But when Wolfe takes a case, it means something in his brain clicked. Maybe it was your sincerity. Maybe the puzzle appealed. Maybe he hates early curtains. Could be anything. She let out a small breath that almost turned into a laugh. Well, I'm glad he did. I opened the cab door for her and nodded. Try to get some sleep if you can. Tomorrow will be long. She settled inside, gave me a look that wasn't gratitude exactly. Something more complicated. The cab pulled away into the traffic. When I returned to the house, Wolfe was in the office, not looking at me because he didn't need to. You escorted her to transportation, he said, like a gentleman, or at least a convincing imitation. Bah, your imitations are always too embellished. He leaned back, hands folded over his middle. Your impressions. She's scared but not panicked. Sharp. Not lying. At least not about the important parts. And she's genuinely worried someone's going to kill the man. Not to protect him, but to protect the show. An intriguing motive, Wolfe murmured. To preserve something by preventing a murder, yet also by avoiding the police. It is a double constraint. I dislike constraints. You accepted the case, I reminded him. I accepted the challenge, he corrected. The case remains to be seen. He closed his eyes, shifting into that silent, immovable state he enters when preparing to work without moving an inch. Report to me tomorrow afternoon, he said. Observe, listen, and do not meddle unless necessary. I headed upstairs. Tomorrow I'd be walking into a theatre where someone had already tried to drop a curtain earlier than scheduled. With my luck, the next cue wouldn't be much more forgiving. Morning found Wolfe in the plant rooms and me with a cup of coffee strong enough to kick back. By 10, I was out the door with the address of the Lyric Paramount in my pocket and a sense that the day would not include any peaceful interludes. The city was in one of its 4 moods, cool enough to remind you it had teeth, warm enough to make you think it didn't intend to use them yet. The Lyric Paramount sat on West 47th, wearing its age like an old diva, cracked makeup, regal posture, and no apologies. The marquee lights were off, which felt like seeing a celebrity without her jewelry. I headed around to the stage door and buzzed. A man with a headset and a permanent frown cracked the door. We're dark until 2, no visitors. He had the voice of a man who has spent too long telling people they can't do what they want. I gave him my best harmless smile. Name's Archie Goodwin. Miss Voss left word I'd be stopping by. The frown didn't soften, but I got the sense he'd been told to expect me. He swung the door open and gestured me inside. She's in the rehearsal hall. They're running notes. Don't touch anything. If I start rearranging the scenery, you have my permission to tackle me. He grunted, which I think was his version of a warm welcome. The backstage was every backstage I've ever seen. Ropes, flats, ladders, gaffer tape marking out paths for people who ignore them anyway. The smell was the same too. Dust, old costumes, and whatever cleaning product theaters buy, in bulk. People moved around with the practiced chaos that looks random until you're in the way. Lydia spotted me before I spotted her. She was sitting cross-legged on the edge of the stage, script open on her lap, talking to a woman who could only be Nina Darcy. Tall, poised, the sort of face that wins arguments before a word is spoken. Lydia dismissed her gently and came toward me. "You're early," she said. "Habit. Saves lives. Ruins breakfasts. Who's the doorman with the delightful personality?" "That's Marcus. He runs sound and thinks the rest of us are incompetent. He's wrong, but it keeps him busy." "Convenient. I'll start my tour with someone who won't bother lying." I glanced around. "Mind if I look over the scene of yesterday's excitement?" Her expression grew cautious. "Mason's up there now, checking lines before tonight's performance. He doesn't like outsiders on the grid." "Few people do," I said. "But I'll talk to him on the ground before I start impersonating a rigger." She led me toward the wings. Mason Kell was exactly what I expected. A man built from rope and coffee, with forearms that looked like they'd been carved from old lumber. He was halfway up a ladder, inspecting a pulley, and he didn't bother climbing down to greet us. "You're the detective," he said without looking. "Wrong profession," I said. "I work with one. Archie Goodwin." "That's supposed to impress me?" he asked, still studying the pulley like it had personally offended him. "No. Impressing you looks like a full-time job, and I'm already employed." That got me a glance. Brief, assessing, not unfriendly. "What do you need to know?" "Why a brand new rope would decide to misbehave." "It didn't decide," he said. "Someone helped it along." "You're sure?" "If you saw what I saw, you wouldn't ask." He finally started his way down the ladder. Fibers cut with a fine-tooth blade. Clean, deliberate, and whoever did it knew enough to stop before it was obvious. "Any chance one of your crew decided to practice rope trimming on company time?" His jaw tightened. "My crew doesn't do sloppy work, and they sure as hell don't sabotage lines." "Touchy topic," I noted. He gave a short laugh with no humor in it. "You spend 10 years keeping actors from dying because they forget where they're standing, you get protective about your job." Fair enough. "So if it wasn't your people, who else had access?" "No one," he said firmly. "Unless someone stole the key from the lockbox." I stored that. Keys always have stories and never short ones. Before I could ask more, Lydia touched my arm lightly. "Archie, Owen wants to see me about tonight's scene adjustments. Will you be okay on your own?" "I've been okay in worse company." I nodded to Mason. "I'll want to see the cut when you've got a minute." "You'll see it," he said. "But don't expect revelations. Whoever did it wasn't an amateur." He walked off toward the fly rail, and I watched him go, thinking about deliberate cuts and convenient accidents. I had talked to exactly one suspect and already had more questions than Wolfe would tolerate without brandy. And the curtain, the rope, and the safety mechanism still needed a closer look. Somewhere in this theater, someone had rehearsed a killing. And if they were planning a second performance, I intended to be in the audience. I let Mason get back to his ropes and pulleys and made my way deeper into the backstage maze. If you've never wandered the underbelly of a working theater, imagine a place where every corner contains something designed to fall, swing, or roll at the worst possible moment. Add in performers with fragile egos and technicians with strong opinions, and you get the ecosystem. My next stop was Leo Chalmers, the stage manager, the man who'd found the cut rope. If Mason handled the muscle of the place, Leo handled the nerves. I spotted him standing over a clipboard like it owed him money, calling out cues to no one in particular. "Leo Chalmers?" I said. He didn't look up. "Unless there's another man here fundamentally questioning his career choices, yes." "I'm Archie Goodwin." Miss Voss said you'd spare a moment. His eyes flicked up, sharp, quick, and carrying a level of exhaustion I usually associate with new parents or homicide detectives. Ah, the outside help? He closed the clipboard. All right. Walk with me. He moved at a brisk pace, weaving through the wings with the precision of someone who has spent years dodging scenery changes. I followed. I understand you found the cut, I said. I did, he replied. And if you're hoping I'll say it was an accident, I won't. It wasn't. What convinced you? He shot me a look. Because I know this place. I know every cable, every counterweight, every bolt that's been tightened twice because someone didn't trust the first tightening. That rope was fine yesterday. Today it wasn't. There's only one path between those two states. Someone cut it. Exactly. All right, I said. Who had access? He slowed just enough to give me a clean, flat look. That's why you're here, isn't it? If I had that answer, we wouldn't need Nero Wolfe. I didn't bother being surprised. Word travels backstage faster than a rumor in a high school cafeteria. You think someone's targeting Victor Harrow? I asked. Oh, I don't think, he said. I know someone wants him out of the way. I just don't know yet if they want him dead or just damaged. Not exactly a man loved by his colleagues, I said. Leo snorted. Victor Harrow is tolerated the way you tolerate a loud patron at a restaurant. You can't make him leave because he's paying the bill. Meaning? Meaning half this. Company hates him, the other half fears him, and all of them depend on him. It's a wonderful incubator for resentment. We reached the prompt corner. Leo's command center, a headset, a monitor, a stack of scripts, and a nest of cables that looked like they were plotting mutiny. Let me guess, I said. You saw where he was standing last night. He always stands there. It's his ritual. Leo leaned against the console. That curtain drop wasn't spontaneous. The timing was too perfect. Or too lucky, I offered. There's no such thing as luck in a fly system, he replied. Only intention. That was a line that would have made Wolfe grunt in appreciation. All right, I said. Let me ask you something blunt. If someone did want Harrow dead, who's your top pick? He hesitated for the first time. My top pick? Off the record? There's no record, I said. Just my excellent memory. Leo took a breath. Nina. That surprised me. Your leading lady? She and Victor have history. Leo rubbed the back of his neck. Bad history. He dangled a role over her to get what he wanted. She turned him down. She got the role anyway because Lydia insisted, but Victor never forgave her for refusing. That's not exactly a motive for murder. You're thinking like someone who spends time with sane people. Leo looked at me, weary but certain. Nina Darcy holds grudges the way normal people hold umbrellas. Constantly, and for any weather. Before I could press him, someone called his name from across the stage. He grimaced. That's my cue, he said. If you need more, find me at the production desk. He moved off, headset already in hand. I stood there for a moment, letting the stage's hum settle around me. Nina Darcy, poised, polished, and, according to Leo, carrying enough resentment to fill a script. As I headed toward the rehearsal hall to find her, I felt that familiar tightening in the air, the one that meant the day was about to get more interesting, and not in a way Wolfe would appreciate. I was beginning to understand why Lydia had come to us early. Someone here knew exactly how to drop a curtain, and exactly who they wanted standing beneath it. Nina Darcy was exactly where an actress of her caliber would be at 11:30 in the morning. Rehearsing a monologue she knew perfectly well how to deliver, in front of a mirror that had no chance of applauding her. She noticed me the way a cat notices a stranger entering its kingdom, without shifting her posture, but with total awareness. I waited until she finished a line involving lost love, fragile hope, and a metaphor about rain that I hoped Lydia had written ironically. When she paused for breath, I stepped into her line of sight. Miss Darcy. Her reflection's eyes narrowed first. Then she turned, slow and controlled, like she was executing a stage direction. Up close, she was, all angles and intention, every gesture precise, every expression chosen. "You must be the investigator," she said. Voice, cool velvet. Smile, calculated. "Archie Goodwin," I confirmed, "here on behalf of Miss Voss." "I see." Her gaze flicked over me, cataloguing what I wore, how I stood, and possibly my cholesterol. "What can I do for you?" I didn't bother easing into it. Wolfe prefers a direct line, and it was time to see how she handled force. "I'm looking into the curtain incident. I'm told you and Victor Harrow have a colorful history." Nina tilted her head as though someone had just asked her to evaluate an amateur's Shakespeare audition. "Colorful is a generous word," she said. "Victor and I have had disagreements." "Over roles?" "Over dignity," she corrected lightly. "He once suggested that I would advance faster if I were less principled. I declined the offer. He wasn't used to hearing no." I leaned one shoulder against a costume rack. "And that caused tension." She let out a small laugh, low, elegant, and utterly humorless. "Archie, everything causes tension with Victor. He collects animosity like playbills, but I am not interested in harming him. He's not worth the effort." "Everyone's worth the effort if they're in your way," I said. She met my eyes fully then, and I saw the steel beneath the charm. "If I wanted Victor out of my way," she said, "I would use my talent, not a pulley." "Meaning you have an alibi for the sabotage?" "Meaning I don't crawl around the grid with knives," she said, "and I was on stage during that cue. You can ask half the company." "That's the plan." Her expression shifted. Just a flicker when I added, "Leo thinks you're the most likely culprit." A shadow passed behind her eyes. "Leo Chalmers," she murmured, "the Oracle of Gloom. He resents anyone who reminds him he never made it as an actor." "Is that a no?" "That is a professional no, a personal no, and a legal no. If Victor Harrow is destined to be flattened by a poorly timed curtain, I prefer not to be blamed for the world's lack of taste." I believed her, mostly. There was fire in her, but not the smoldering resentment Leo had described. If she wanted someone dead, she'd do it with style, not ropes. "Fine," I said. "One more thing. You know where Victor stands during Act 2? "Everyone does," she said. "He's predictable, like a cough in a quiet theater." "And did you see him there last night?" "Yes," she said. "And when the curtain dropped, he shrieked, not loudly, just enough to confirm that even tyrants get scared." "Did anyone seem surprised, more than the rest?" Nina tapped her chin. "Owen, the director, he looked rattled, more than Victor." "Owen Fleet?" She nodded. "If you want to understand artistic panic, talk to him. He fears the play will fail. He fears everything will fail." I thanked her and left her to rehearse her monologue about heartbreak while I went searching for a man who feared failure more than death. Owen Fleet was easy to spot, pacing the width of the rehearsal hall, gesturing wildly at an assistant who seemed to be trying to merge with the wallpaper. He was lean, nervous, and carried the energy of someone who could be startled by his own reflection. I waited until he dismissed the assistant, then approached with a slow, calm usually reserved for skittish horses. "Mr. Fleet?" He spun toward me. "If this is about the lighting adjustments, I've already spoken to Marcus. It's about the curtain," I said. "Archie Goodwin." His shoulders deflated like I'd poked a hole in him. "Oh, Lydia's detective." "Not exactly," I said, "but close enough." His hands fluttered. "Look, it was an accident. A horrible, terrifying accident, but still an accident." "You sure about that?" "No," he said instantly, "but I'm trying to be. I have a show opening in 9 days. I can't survive sabotage." "Did you see anyone near the ropes last night?" "No," he said. "But I wasn't looking. I was watching Victor. I always watch Victor. He's a walking disaster. If he breaks an ankle, the investors will panic. And you're absolutely calm, I said dryly. He shot me a glance. I'm a director. Panic is my native language. What did you think when the curtain fell? His answer came faster than breath. I thought someone had tried to kill him. I raised my brows. That's a strong reaction. It's the truth. He stepped closer, lowering his voice. Victor has been pushing everyone too far. He insults the cast, terrifies the investors, meddles in my blocking, and undermines Lydia. Someone was bound to snap. And who do you think snapped? His throat bobbed. I don't know. I don't want to know, but... He hesitated. If it happens again, I'm afraid we won't get a second miracle. That was interesting. Not the fear. He wore that like a tailored suit, but the certainty, the expectation. Owen wasn't telling me everything. Not yet. And as I watched him pace again, frantic and fragile, I felt the first real tug of something Wolfe would recognize. A pattern beginning to form. Two suspects ruled themselves out with too much polish. One was crackling with fear. But the cut rope hadn't made itself, and there were still more people in this theater whose stories hadn't been told. The next cue, I suspected, wouldn't be as controlled as the first. I left Owen before his pacing wore a trench in the floor and stepped back into the corridor, letting the orchestra of backstage noise settle around me again. If Nina was cool calculation and Owen was unfiltered nerves, then the next person on my list, Alan Price, the understudy, would likely be something else entirely. Understudies usually hover between ambition and invisibility, and that mixture can get volatile under pressure. I found him in the green room, sitting on a battered couch with a script balanced on his knee and a cup of coffee he was treating like it contained courage. He looked younger than the rest, early 20s, clean-cut, eager in the way that suggests he hasn't yet had the optimism kicked out of him by the industry. When he saw me, he sat up straighter, the script snapping shut like he'd been caught reading someone's diary. "You're Archie Goodwin," he said. "Lydia told us you might be around." "That's me. Mind answering a few questions?" He gestured to the chair across from him. "Sure. Can't promise I'll be interesting, though. That's not usually my department." That alone made me like him a little. "Let's start simple," I said. "Where were you when the curtain dropped last night?" "In the wings on stage, right? Nina has that big scene in Act 2, and I always watch it from that side so I can learn her pacing. Not that I'm expecting to go on anytime soon." He gave a weak grin. "Unless she breaks an ankle. Which I hope she doesn't." "You see anything unusual?" "Just Victor," he said. "Hovering like always. He watches everything, notes everything. Sometimes I think if he could swap places with the lead actor mid-show, he'd try. That a common opinion around here?" He shifted in his seat. "Look, I'm not supposed to say anything negative. Lydia likes to keep the team focused, but Victor is intense." "In what way?" "He wants control of everything, even things that aren't his department. He questions blocking, line delivery, costume choices. He once told Nina her shoes weren't expressing enough confidence." I made a face. "Shoes. Confidence. Yeah," Alan said. She almost threw them at him. "I believe that. Did Victor have issues with you personally?" I asked. Alan shook his head quickly. "No. I mean, he barely notices me. I'm the understudy. As long as I don't breathe wrong, I'm invisible, which is fine. Mostly." Invisibility could be a strong motive for some, but Alan lacked the heat. His resentment, if any, was tepid. "All right," I said. "Next question. Who do you think might want Victor out of the picture?" Alan's expression tightened. "Honestly, there are days when it feels like the whole theater would take shifts pushing him off a balcony. But doing something like cutting a line? That's different." "Different how?" "It requires planning, nerve, and knowing exactly how the rigging works. Most of us just walk on stage, do our jobs, and hope nothing falls on us." Reasonable and true. What about the apprentices? I asked. Geordie and Beth. His eyebrows rose. Them? No. Geordie's still terrified of Mason, and Beth is too busy proving she's better than him. They wouldn't pull something like this. As if summoned by reputation, Beth strode past the open doorway, sharp profile, posture straight as a measuring rod, tool belt slung low on her hips. Geordie followed behind her, slower, more uncertain, carrying a coil of rope like it was radioactive. I filed that away. Both would need a conversation. Thanks, Alan, I said, standing. You've been helpful. He opened his script again, but stopped as I reached the door. Mr. Goodwin. Yeah. Do you think someone's really trying to kill him? Victor, I mean. I met his eyes. The kid deserved honesty. I think someone rehearsed something dangerous, I said. And when people rehearse danger, sometimes they go back for opening night. He swallowed. I stepped into the hallway, planning my next move. The apprentices first, then a closer look at the grid before Mason decided I'd overstepped. After that, I'd check in with Lydia, compare notes, and, if Wolfe's schedule allowed, report in. But before I reached Geordie and Beth, a figure appeared at the end of the corridor, walking toward me with the unhurried confidence of a man who believed the world should get out of his way. Victor Harrow himself. Tailored suit, perfect hair, expression that hovered somewhere between charm and cruelty. He looked like a man who would thank you for saving his life, only if you did it with the proper level of deference. Ah, he said, stopping in front of me. You must be the detective Miss Voss hired behind my back. His smile didn't reach his eyes. Archie Goodwin, I said. I don't work behind backs. I work in front of people. It's more efficient. Well, his gaze swept over me with the casual judgment of a seasoned critic. Let's have a conversation, Mr. Goodwin. There are things I suspect you ought to hear, and things I want to make very clear. I'd expected we would meet eventually. I just hadn't expected him to walk straight into the investigation as though he owned it. But then, Victor Harrow never walked anywhere any other way. Victor led the way toward a quieter stretch of hall, the kind with framed posters from past productions, hung just crooked enough to prove no one ever stopped long enough to straighten them. He walked with the posture of a man making an entrance, even when no one was watching. I followed at a pace that suggested I wasn't impressed, because I wasn't. He stopped near a poster for a revival he'd produced 5 years earlier, something with a lot of feathers and a short run, and pivoted to face me. Miss Voss told me you were thorough, he said. I appreciate thoroughness, Mr. Goodwin, but I also appreciate efficiency. This, he gestured vaguely upward, meaning the rigging, the rope, the curtain, the attempted homicide, was an accident. The kind of thing that happens in any old building. Theaters creak, lines slip, sandbags get old. That's a lovely speech, I said. Practiced even. But rope doesn't cut itself. His nostrils flared. Just slightly, but enough to mark the first crack in the polished exterior. Lydia is imaginative, he said. She's under pressure. Opening a play can do that to a person. She didn't cut the rope. I never said she did. But she dramatizes. Always has. It's why she's compelling on stage. Victor adjusted his cufflinks, solid gold, naturally, and continued, What concerns me is not the rope, it's the gossip, the fear, the suggestion that someone here wishes me harm. That kind of rumor can destroy morale faster than a bad review. Morale? I asked. Or your standing? He smiled again, flat, professional, and more choreographed than anything happening on stage. Both, ideally. A production needs unity, stability, meaning everyone should fall in line behind you. Meaning, he corrected smoothly, that chaos must be managed. I've seen chaos. This isn't it. This is sabotage. His jaw tightened. You have no proof. I have a cut line, a theater full of motives, and you standing directly under the target. That's a start. Victor took a step closer, lowering his voice to a conspiratorial tone that would have worked better if I liked him even a little. "Then let me give you a piece of information you won't get from anyone else," he said. "This production has enemies, not just within these walls. There are investors who want it to fail. Rivals. People who would delight in seeing my name dragged through the mud. That list have names, or is it just a concept you're in love with?" His smile didn't move an inch, but his eyes sharpened. "There's a man named Roland Fenn," he said. "Critic. He's had an unhealthy interest in Lydia's work. Negative reviews disguised as moral concern, and he despises me. If the show collapses, or if something unfortunate happens to me, he gets to write his masterpiece about hubris." "A critic with a grudge," I said. "That's a new one." Victor ignored the sarcasm. "And then there's Haley Arnott, former producer. She and I had a disagreement over finances. A lawsuit was threatened. She still has friends on the technical crews around Broadway. Access can be bought." "Can it?" I looked him over. "You're tossing names quickly, almost like you want to aim me away from the cast." "I want you to aim yourself toward reality," he said. "Everyone here needs this show. No one would sabotage it." "Nina would," I said, testing him. His expression finally broke. "Not much. Just a flicker, a quick compression of the lips, but enough to show the crack beneath the plaster." "Nina likes to pretend she despises me," he said. "She wouldn't risk her career. She's too smart." "And Leo?" He scoffed. "Leo cares more about this theater than his own life. He wouldn't touch the rigging unless he was fixing someone else's incompetence." "Alan?" "Who?" "The understudy." Victor waved a dismissive hand. "Those children don't matter." "Children sometimes do drastic things," I said. He didn't appreciate that. The temperature around him dropped a couple degrees. "Listen to me carefully," Victor said, stepping even closer. "What happened last night will not happen again. I will not tolerate panic. I will not tolerate rumor. And I will not tolerate interference." "You hired Lydia," I corrected. "Lydia hired Wolfe. Wolfe hired me." He stiffened at the structure of that chain. "And I don't work for you," I added. Victor assessed me like I was an unreliable prop. "You want a theory? Fine. Here's my theory. Someone is trying to frighten me into withdrawing my investment. Someone who wants the show to fail before it ever opens. Follow the money, Mr. Goodwin." "I'm following the knife marks." He exhaled sharply, then smoothed his tie, reassembling himself piece by piece. "I have rehearsal to oversee. Do try to avoid disrupting the process." He walked off without waiting for a response. I watched him go, thinking about the tidy stack of motives he'd just thrown at my feet. Helpful, possibly. Genuine, less likely. Victor Harrow was too polished, too defensive, and too accustomed to control. And people like that get very nervous when something in their world stops obeying the cue. As I turned the corner to find the apprentices, a voice came from behind me, quiet but urgent. "Mr. Goodwin?" Caro Lind, Lydia's assistant, stood there gripping a clipboard like it was a flotation device. "I need to talk to you," she said. "Privately." And just like that, the day's script took a sharp but perfectly timed turn. Caro didn't wait for my agreement. She turned on her heel and headed toward a narrow side hallway lined with costume racks and dim bulbs that hummed like they resented their jobs. I followed her, noting the tension in her shoulders and the speed of her steps. Assistants don't move like that unless they're afraid or late, and Caro didn't look like the late type. When we reached a quiet alcove that held nothing but crates of props and a forgotten ladder, she stopped, checked both directions, then faced me with a seriousness that belonged in a confession booth. "Thank you," she said, voice low. "I didn't want anyone to see us talking." "I gathered," I said. "You picked a spot that even the ghosts avoid." She managed a shaky exhale. "I'm not supposed to talk to you." I'm not supposed to eat before dinner. We all push boundaries. Her fingers tightened around the clipboard. What Lydia told you about last night. She isn't wrong. But there's something she didn't tell you. Something she doesn't know. I gave her space to continue. She needed it. She swallowed hard, and her eyes darted once toward the ceiling as if remembering something unpleasant. 2 days ago, she said, I found a note taped to the mirror in Lydia's dressing room. What kind of note? A warning. Show me. She hesitated just long enough for me to wonder if she'd back out, then slid a folded slip of paper from between the pages of her clipboard. I opened it. Typed letters, no handwriting, brief, chilling. Keep your play on the page, not in the air. You're risking more than reviews, no signature, no explanation. But it had the voice of someone who preferred anonymity to courage. Why didn't Lydia see this? I asked. Because I took it down before she got in. Caro's throat worked. I didn't want to distract her before previews. She's under so much pressure already. And what was the plan? Frame it. Throw it out, she said, ashamed. I did throw it out. But then the curtain fell and I panicked. I dug through the trash last night until I found it again. The paper was creased, faintly stained. Trash-sourced, indeed. Why come to me now? I asked. Because... Her eyes lifted to mine. Wide, earnest, guilty. Because I'm scared, Mr. Goodwin, and because I don't think this is just about Victor. I think someone wants to ruin Lydia, or stop her, or punish her, and they're willing to make it look like an accident. I folded the note neatly. Anyone see you remove it originally? No, she said. We stagger entrances in the morning. And Lydia always arrives last. I made sure to be early that day. Anyone at all, have access to her dressing room besides the cast and crew? She clenched her jaw. Technically, no, but the lock is old. If someone didn't want to respect boundaries, they wouldn't need a key. Who knew the contents of the play well enough to send something like this? On the page, not in the air. That's a reference to Act 3, isn't it? Her eyes widened. Yes, it's a line from the final confrontation scene. Lydia wrote it. Which meant the sender wasn't just threatening the production. They understood it. Caro, I said, you've been holding on to this for days. Why not tell Lydia this morning? I was going to, but she's already half convinced that the curtain was a rehearsal for murder. If she saw this note, she'd think the whole theater was collapsing under her. She's not as fragile as you think. She's also not as invincible as she pretends, Caro countered. Smart kid. Sharp. And loyal enough to put herself in the line of suspicion if she wasn't careful. Did anyone see you rummaging through the trash last night? I asked. No, she said quickly, then hesitated. Well, Alan walked in as I was leaving the hall, but he didn't see the note, and he wouldn't tell anyone even if he had. Why not? She blinked. Because he likes Lydia. Romantically. No, she said, then amended, well, maybe, a little, but he's harmless. Everyone at this theater seemed harmless until rope started falling prematurely. I made a mental note to revisit Alan. Caro, I said gently, is there anyone else Lydia's had conflict with recently? Anyone beyond the names I already know? She hesitated again. I don't know if it's important, she said. But Lydia had a fight with Owen 2 nights ago. A big one. What about? The ending of the play, she said. Owen thinks it needs rewriting. Lydia refuses. Voices were raised. Very raised. And Victor? He sided with Owen, she whispered. Loudly. That was awkward timing. A disagreement over the play's climax, right before someone staged a real one in the wings. Caro pressed her lips together. If Lydia knew there were threats coming from more than one direction, I think she'd lose focus, I offered. Lose control, she said softly. I nodded. You did the right thing bringing this to me. She looked relieved, but only slightly. Guilt has a long half-life. Go on, I said. Act normal. Don't talk about this, and lock Lydia's dressing room door from now on, even if the lock is a joke. She nodded and hurried off, disappearing back into the busy hum of backstage life. I stayed where I was, rereading the note in my mind while calculating which suspect benefited from a threat delivered directly to Lydia rather than Victor. This wasn't about killing the producer. It was about stopping the play, which meant the curtain drop might have been stagecraft for something bigger. And someone in this theater wanted the next cue to be devastating. If Wolfe sensed even half of what was brewing, he'd have Fritz freeze a bottle of Riesling in advance. Pocketed the note just as footsteps approached, light, uneven, and accompanied by the unmistakable sound of someone muttering apologies to objects that couldn't hear them. Geordie, the apprentice rigger, came around the corner carrying a crate of clamps. His eyes widened when he saw me, like I'd been conjured by a bad thought. "Oh, Mr. Goodwin, right?" he said, shifting the crate so fast a clamp nearly escaped. "Sorry, this place is a mess today. Everyone's on edge. Not that they're not usually, but today it's more edgish." "Relax," I said. "You're not in trouble." That was enough reassurance for him to trip slightly on the rug as he attempted to straighten himself. "Great," he said. "Good. Because Mason says I look guilty even when I'm just standing, but I didn't touch anything I shouldn't touch, except the ladder earlier, but that was—" "Geordie," I cut in, "stop before your alibi turns into a confession." He nodded vigorously, clutching the crate like it was the last buoy on a sinking ship. I decided to use the opening. "You worked the rigging yesterday?" He swallowed. "I did. But not near the main curtain line. Mason handles that, personally. Always. I just assisted with the borders." "And you didn't go up to the grid after hours?" He blinked hard. "No, absolutely not. I mean, I've forgotten tools up there before, but never on nights when we had previews. Mason would kill me. Like, spiritually." I believed him. Geordie had the energy of someone who would confess to opening a window too quickly if you asked him the right way. "Tell me something," I said. "Did you notice anything off the last few days? Someone hanging around where they shouldn't be? Someone jumpy or nosy or too interested in the equipment?" He thought hard enough that his eyebrows nearly touched. "Well, Beth's been more intense than usual, but she's always intense. And Nina yelled at Marcus yesterday, but that was about a sound cue. And Leo's been Leo-ish." "What about Victor?" Geordie's eyes darted around like Victor might appear out of the floorboards. "He's everywhere," he whispered. "He shows up in the wings without warning, like a theater poltergeist. Yesterday he made me redo a knot because he said it didn't look confident enough." "A confident knot," I said. "I'll add that to my list of things I didn't know existed." Geordie leaned in slightly. "Do you think someone actually meant to hurt him?" "The rope was cut," I said. "Draw your own conclusions." He whimpered, softly, then hurried off before his anxiety sprouted limbs. The apprentices didn't smell of guilt, but they smelled of fear, and fear has its own use. I headed toward the stage again, intending to catch Beth before she disappeared up another ladder, but I only made it 2 steps before someone else intercepted me. This time it was Lydia. She moved fast, clutching a stack of notes from Owen and looking like she'd been fighting gravity all morning. When she saw me, relief flickered through her, fleeting, unguarded. "I've been looking for you," she said. "Did you find out anything?" "Plenty," I said. "Nothing conclusive yet, but plenty." She exhaled, the tension in her shoulders softening for half a second before snapping right back. "Owen is rewriting Act 3 again. Victor thinks it's too sentimental. Nina thinks it's too loud, and Mason says someone moved his wrench. It's chaos." "That's Broadway," I said. "That's sabotage waiting to happen. she corrected. Her eyes scanned my face, looking, measuring, hoping. I could see the strain in the way she held her jaw. She was keeping it together by sheer force of will. "There's something else," I said quietly. "Not from me. Caro." Her entire posture changed. "Caro, what about her? She found a note on your mirror. A threat. She hid it. She didn't want to overwhelm you." For a moment, Lydia said nothing. Then she spoke through barely parted lips. "Show me." I handed her the paper. She read it once, twice. A third time, the muscle in her cheek tightening. "On the page, not in the air," she murmured. "They quoted my own line at me, meaning the sender knows the script, and you." Her fingers curled around the note like she wanted to crush it but wouldn't give whoever wrote it that satisfaction. "This isn't Victor," she said. "He's arrogant, but he doesn't do anonymous threats. He'd staple them to your forehead and sign them twice." "Agreed. And Owen doesn't have the stomach for this." "True. And Nina, she'd stab you with a word, not a rope. Probably." She paced once, fast, like her body was chasing her thoughts before they outran her. "So this is personal," she said. "Someone who resents me, or hates me, or wants the plague dead, or wants you scared." She stopped in front of me. "Well, congratulations to them," she said, voice low. "It's working." She wasn't trembling. Lydia didn't tremble, but there was a tightness behind her eyes that gave me a glimpse of how much she was holding back. The pressure, the risk, the fact that someone might be targeting her show. Or her. "Tonight's performance," I said. "Is anything unusual planned? Any major cue changes? Any big emotional scenes that someone might want to enhance?" She shook her head. "No. Same as last night." "Then someone may try again." She closed her eyes briefly. Just once, before opening them with new steel. Then we stopped them. "Wolfe's working on it," I said. "I'll report to him this afternoon, and I'll be watching tonight. Learned that at the stakeout school of hard chairs." That got her to smile, barely. "Be careful, Archie." "I'm always careful." "That's not what your reputation says." I was about to make a retort worthy of the record books, but she stepped closer than a client usually does, and lowered her voice. "I want you in the wings tonight," she said. "Not the orchestra, near the curtain. If anything happens, I want you there." That was flattering, also dangerous. "Done," I said. But before either of us could add anything else, a shout cut through the hall. Marcus, yelling from the sound booth. It wasn't a normal shout. It was the kind that comes when someone sees something they shouldn't. Lydia and I exchanged a look, and I knew without speaking that the next cue had just hit, and the house lights were about to dim on somebody's calm. By the time I got Marcus calmed down enough to speak in full sentences, Wolfe was already on his way, figuratively. I'd phoned him the second Marcus's shout echoed through the building, and Wolfe, in turn, had delivered instructions in the tone reserved for emergencies, stampedes, and interruptions of mealtime. Marcus had found something. Another rope. Not cut this time, but retied. Badly. Deliberately badly. A knot meant to slip under weight. Not fatal if it failed, just embarrassing. But the message was clear. The sabotage wasn't over. Which is why, 3 hours later, after the performance ended with no lives lost and no unexpected curtain calls, Archie Goodwin, yours truly, herded 5 suspects, 1 nervous playwright, and 1 furious producer into Nero Wolfe's office at the Brownstone. Wolfe sat in his oversized throne behind his desk, hands steepled, eyes half-lidded like a well-fed panther pretending not to be hungry. Everyone else stood or perched uneasily. Victor Harrow was pacing, full of offended dignity. Nina Darcy lounged like she was between acts. Owen Fleet looked ready to faint or flee. Leo Chalmers stood stiff as a metronome. Beth and Geordie hovered near the wall, whispering theories neither believed. And Lydia Voss, our client, watched them all with the focus of someone who had finally realized she, not Victor, might have been the intended target. Wolfe began without ceremony. "Someone in this room," he said, "has practiced murder." Victor scoffed. Nina arched a brow. Owen swallowed audibly. Beth stiffened. Lydia flinched, but only slightly. Wolfe's gaze flicked briefly to me, a cue to keep everyone still if necessary. I leaned on the globe stand, ready for action Wolfe hoped I wouldn't need to take. He continued, "The curtain incident was not intended to kill Mr. Harrow, as he has assumed. Nor was it meant to kill Miss Voss, though she fears it. It was meant to appear dangerous enough to frighten both." Victor snorted. "Why would anyone want to frighten me?" Wolfe closed his eyes. "Must you ask? Your personality is offense enough." Before Victor could erupt, Wolfe pressed on. The culprit did not want death. They wanted collapse, the collapse of the production. His gaze settled on the room like a weight. The motive was professional ruin, not homicide. Owen trembled. Nina's lips parted. Lydia inhaled sharply. Wolfe pointed one thick finger. "The key is the note Miss Lind retrieved from the trash." Lydia gasped. "You know about that?" "I would be a poor detective," Wolfe said dryly, "if I did not." Caro, suddenly the smallest person in the room, stepped forward as if confessing, but Wolfe lifted a hand. "You are not the culprit, Miss Lind. You lacked the knowledge and the opportunity. But the note's language revealed something vital. Only someone deeply familiar with the script could have written it. Specifically, someone who resented the ending." Owen closed his eyes. "No." "Indeed," Wolfe said. "You, Mr. Fleet, argued vehemently with Miss Voss about altering the final act. She refused. You feared the critics would blame you for her artistic choice." Owen shook his head wildly. "I wouldn't hurt anyone. I wanted the ending changed, that's all." "You're telling the truth," Wolfe agreed. "You lack the nerve for sabotage on a catwalk." Nina let out breath she'd been holding. "Then who?" "Beth," Wolfe said. The room froze. Beth's head snapped up. "What? Me?" "Yes," Wolfe said. "You possessed the technical skill to disguise rope tampering as wear. You had access to the grid, and you had the one motive none of the others possessed." She stared at him, disbelief warring with fury. "I had no reason." "You had every reason," Wolfe said calmly. "You wanted the understudy, Alan Price, to take the lead role." A ripple of stunned reaction swept through the room. Beth's face drained of color. Wolfe continued, unhurried, precise. "Alan is inexperienced, earnest, and quite talented. With the right push, he might have been noticed, elevated. You care for him, Miss Beth. Deeply." Her silence was confirmation. "But Alan had no chance while Mr. Harrow dominated the production," Wolfe said. "You believed that frightening him, causing him to withdraw his investment, would lead to recasting, restructuring, an opportunity for Alan to emerge." Beth whispered, "I just wanted the play to be fair." "Art is not fair," Wolfe said. "Nor is sabotage." Victor's chest puffed. "So she tried to kill me?" "No," Wolfe said firmly. "She tried to frighten you. The cut was incomplete, the safety half engaged, the knot placed where failure would embarrass, not maim. All calculated." Beth's voice was barely audible. "I never meant—" Lydia turned to her, sorrow more than anger in her eyes. "Beth, why didn't you talk to me?" "You wouldn't have listened," Beth said, bitterness cracking her words. "You're all too busy fighting for your vision. No one cares what the apprentices think." Wolfe exhaled through his nose, his version of a sigh. "Miss Voss, I suggest you do what you will. The law must be informed, as tampering with rigging is criminal. But leniency is within your control." Lydia nodded slowly. "I'll think carefully." Beth looked at her, guilt blooming like a bruise. Victor naturally made it about himself. You see, this is what happens when amateurs are allowed access. Mr. Harrow, Wolfe said sharply, for once in your theatrical career, I advise silence. Victor obeyed. Miracles do happen. Wolfe leaned back. Archie, see them out. I ushered the procession out the front door. Victor storming, Nina floating, Owen wobbling, Leo nodding grimly, Beth shaking silently, and Lydia lingering with a look of mixed sadness and gratitude. When the door closed, I returned to Wolfe, who was already reaching for his beer. Well, I said, that's that. Curtain down. Pfui, he grumbled. It was never about the curtain. It was about ambition. It usually is. Will Lydia's play survive? That depends, Wolfe said, on whether art can withstand the folly of those who create it. He took a long drink. Then, settling deeper into his chair, he added, and whether human stupidity, which is infinite, can coexist briefly with artistic aspiration, which is rare. I sat, stretched my legs, and grinned. That's your final line? For tonight, he said. And just like that, the brownstone returned to its natural state, quiet, orderly, and absolutely uninterested in theatrical drama, until the next knock on the door, 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 knock on the door.